In that first video, I took you through the Canvas page and kind of helped you see what the day-to-day of this class is going to look like. In this video, we're going to focus on what the grading looks like and what assessments look like and how that translates into a letter grade ultimately at the end of the quarter. So I use a method of evaluation called standards-based grading. So this is not your traditional grading of math tests that you're likely used to. You're probably used to this idea that you have different problems and those problems are worth different amounts of points, and you're going to earn either all those points or only some of them. It just depending upon how much partial credit you earn, right? And so at the end of the test, you get something at the top like 89%. And what does that mean? That means that you just earned 89% of the points that were available on that test. Okay, but what I want is a couple of things. One is I want there to be a little bit more meaning behind my evaluation of your work. That'll help you better understand where you're at with that material. And then secondly, I want to give you a path to improving upon that. Okay, and standards-based grading allows me to do both of those things. So let me start by showing you a document that we saw um, when we were in doing the first video, but I just kind of brushed past, and that is this rubrics document. So what instead of just assigning an arbitrary number of points um, to problems that I assign, what I do instead is I break the class into topics that I call standards. And for each standard, I decide based upon problems that do appear on assessments, whether you're at an expert level, proficient, developing, novice, or not yet. Okay. Now, just to give you an idea, if you're an expert, then that means that really any question I throw at you on that topic, no matter how complicated it is, you're able to knock it out of the park. If you're a proficient, that means you can definitely do all the bread and butter, straightforward questions correctly. And for the most part, you do well even on harder questions, but you might make a mistake here and there. If you're developing, then you probably got the basics down. You can do basic type of problems on that topic, but maybe you struggle with ones that are slightly more complex in nature. Or maybe you make good progress on everything, but you're kind of making a lot of flaws throughout the process. If you're at a novice level, that means that you've definitely demonstrated some understanding of the topic at hand, but you haven't really made enough progress to to get toward an answer on most problems. And then not yet would be like you left it blank, you wrote something that really didn't have to do with the topic, and so on. But to make it even hopefully more helpful to you, I have written a rubric, right? I've described what each of these levels of mastery look like for each of the standards in the class. Okay. And that's how I'm assessing you. Okay. So just let me give you an example. The first assessment you take is going to be over standards 1 through 5. Okay. So here's what it's going to look like for you. And let me just kind of walk through it from the beginning. After you have learned all the material in standards 1 through 5, then it comes time for the standards 1 through 5 assessment. Okay. Now, all assessments in this class have to be done in a proctored testing environment. So you are most likely either going to be coming to the Yakima campus and using its proctored testing center, or you'll be going to the Grandview campus and using its proctored testing center. I will be providing more detail on the day of, before we come up on that first assessment, exactly what you do on that day. But on the day it's scheduled, I'm going to go ahead and open the syllabus here. You will go to the proctored testing center that's nearest you, and you'll go and you'll take your assessment there. Now, let me click on this link in the syllabus. So here are the hours on the Yakima campus. On any day that there's an assessment, you can drop in between 8:30 a.m. and 9 p.m., but you'll want to be there an hour at least before it closes. And on the Grandview campus, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., so be there at 6 p.m. at the latest. If you do not live in the Yakima Grandview areas, there are options for you. If you live in the Ellensburg area, you can use the library there as a proctored testing center, but there is paperwork you have to fill out first. So if that's you, know that the paperwork you need for that is in the orientation quiz you're going to be doing anyway momentarily. But if you have any trouble with that document or can't find it, just send me a Canvas message letting me know. You'll want to get that set up as soon as you can. If you don't live there either, but you live far from all those places, then you can go and find a proctor, but that proctor has to be approved through YVC. And again, you fill out a form that is going to pop up in your orientation quiz. And you need to get the ball rolling on that right away so that YVC has a chance to go through and approve that proctor. So if that's you, probably should just send me a Canvas message, give me a heads up that you're pursuing that. And you'll want to get going right away on that, because your first assessment on standards 1 through 5 is, you can see, Thursday, January 23rd. And because I understand it's a little bit of an inconvenience to come in, all the dates are set ahead of time. So here's all the dates that you'll need to have available for coming in for proctored testing. So plan accordingly. But if you do have any concerns about any of these dates, please reach out to me so we can kind of talk that through and problem solve. All right, so you come in January 23rd, you take the first assessment. The assessment, it's going to look just like a math test. There's going to be questions on it that pertain to the topics that you learned. I do label each question as like standard 1, standard 2, and so on. And there might be multiple standard 1 questions, multiple standard 2 questions. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to look at the collection of each standard, the questions on each standard, and then I'm going to decide, are you at an expert? Are you at proficient, developing, novice, or not yet? Where are you at on those? One of the things that you might have noticed when I pulled the rubric up, scroll down here, is the little numbers here: 4 with the expert, 3 with proficient, 2 with developing. Those are just shorthand, so you're going to see numbers appear on your test, but they're not meant for you to do any kind of math with them. They're just meant for you to, for me to have a quick way of writing where you're at. So when you receive the first assessment back from me, just give you an example here, you're not going to see a score at the top of your assessment. Rather, for each standard, you're going to see a number. So maybe standard 1, you were an expert, so you're going to see a 4 circled. Standard 2, maybe a 3 circled. Standard 3, maybe you got a 2 there. Maybe standard 4, you got a 1 here. And in standard 5, you got a 4 again. All right, so those are your levels of mastery for those standards. Okay. Obviously, you want to get the highest levels of mastery that you can, right? And the higher those are, the better your grade. But I don't want on a first assessment for this to be where your scores are stuck. So let me go back to our calendar for a moment here. So we said the first assessment on standards 1 through 5 is on the 23rd. Okay. Then if I go ahead into February, then you're going to have an assessment over standards 6 through 10 as well on February 5th. Then a week after that, you're going to have an opportunity at a reassessment on standards 1 through 10. All right. So what that means is that on that day, you can go into the test proctoring center and they'll give you a packet from standards 1 through 10. Let me go back to my document here. Maybe since we're talking about 1 through 10, maybe it'd be good to actually show scores for all of those. So standard 6, let's say you had a 3. Standard 7, you also had a 3. Standard 8, you had a 2. Standard 9, you have a 4. And standard 10, you have a 4. All right, so there's your scores. So on that date, what did I say that was? February 12th. You can come in and you'll be given a packet with all 10 of the standards, but you only have to complete the standards in that reassessment that you want to improve upon. Okay. Now, I suggest at a bare minimum that you reassess over any standard that is at less than a 3. So I would definitely reassess on standard 3, on standard 4, and on standard 8. If you are shooting for a solid A in the class, then I would consider also doing ones that you have a proficient or a 3 on, but at the minimum do these ones to bring those scores up. Now, if on the reassessment you get a higher score, then I completely replace the old score and put these in the grade book instead. The idea is, if it took you a little longer to learn the material, what's the difference as long as you learned it, is kind of my attitude toward it. So it's absolutely worth your time if you don't do as well on particular topics on your initial assessment. It is absolutely worth your time to do the work to make sure you understand what you made mistakes on, and then you'll have the opportunity to improve upon those on your reassessment day. Right now, I don't think there'll be any trouble with motivation for doing as well as possible the first time, because what you'll notice is that after you take those initial assessments, right, here's on the 23rd, the class marches on, right? You got to do more. You got to do more video notes. You got to do more homework, right? That nothing stops. So then you have to juggle the studying for the reassessment with learning the new material. So it's hard, right? But if there's stuff that you don't perform as well on initially, that shouldn't be the end of the story. You should be able to use that initial assessment as a learning experience, and then in the reassessment, have the opportunity to bring those scores up. Right. So that's my philosophy of grading. It's a little different, especially with using rubrics instead of points. But I think once students get used to it, they usually like it. They like the idea, even though they have to work hard in order to achieve, in order to take advantage of those reassessments. All right. So let me go back to the syllabus for a moment here. So you can see, and you're going to have this for not just 10 standards, but 27 of them by the end of the quarter. So how does that all get turned into a letter grade? That's a good question. So in your syllabus, there is a rather complicated looking table. And this is how I determine letter grades from all this. Essentially, I count up how many experts, how many proficients, developing, novice, and not yets you have, and what this table decide, right? What letter grade you get. Now, this is not a very user-friendly table. Number one, it's hard to read. But number two, it's only really useful at the end of the quarter after all the standards have been assessed on. Well, what do you do partway through the quarter and you want to get a sense of where you're at? So for that purpose, I've developed a grade projector. And the idea with this grade projector is that at various points in the quarter, you can type in the scores that you have, and it will project out. It'll say you're on pace. Excuse me, you're on pace to do this. So if after the first 5 or the first assessment you take, you have 44244, it'll just say, you know what, you're on pace to get a B. Now that might sound harsh just because I got 1 developing, I'm on pace for a B. Well, understand that what it's doing is it's projecting out. It's thinking, well, if you got 1B here, then you're probably going to get another, 1, 2 here, probably going to get another one next time, and then another one after that, and so on. It's going to project out and say, you're on pace to do this. So, especially early on, just understand that, okay, well, maybe you're going to reassess on that too. And maybe you bring it up to a 3. Well, now all of a sudden you're at an A, right? So this projector is pretty volatile at the early in the quarter. So don't panic by what you see. Just if you have any questions, ask me. But then it becomes more and more accurate as the quarter goes along. So you can just plug in the shorthand, the 4 for expert, 3 for proficient, and so on, for the levels of mastery that you have, and it can give you a sense of where your grade happens to be at any given moment. Okay. There is a final exam. Probably saw that when I had the syllabus pulled up there. So that final exam does factor into the grade, of course. But as with all finals, some of the topics, but not all of the topics, are going to appear on the final. So here's how that works. Let's see here. I think I have enough space. Get a different color. Black. Okay. Let's just do a couple of standards here. Standard 1, standard 2, standard 3, 4. I think that's enough. Standard 5. Okay, up here I'll put before final, on the final, and overall. Okay, so let's say on standard 1, before the final, you had a 4 or an expert going into the on standard 1 before the final was taken. And let's suppose I don't ask about standard 1 on the final. Then your overall score is still at a 4. So if I don't ask about it, whatever score you had, that's what you've got. Let's say on standard 2, you had a 3 before the final, and I did ask about it, and you got a 4 on the final. In that case, it operates just like a reassessment. I replace your old score with the new score. Let's say, though, you had a 4 on standard 3 before the final, and then on the final, you only got a 2. You got a developing. This will be the only time on the final exam throughout the quarter that I will average. So I'd say, well, you have a 4 and a 2. That would average out to a 3. Let's say on standard 4, you have a 3, and then on the final you get a 2. Then the average there is a little awkward. It averages to 2.5. But understand what that means is that you get half of a developing, right, which is a 2, and half of a proficient, which is a 3, when I'm counting up how many of each you have. So that's how the final exam works in. I'll probably remind you of this as we get toward the end of the quarter, because kind of some detail that's easy to forget in the grand scheme of the course, but that's how the final exam works. Now, lastly, you might be thinking, well, kind of sounds like assessments are mainly what matters in terms of determining what my level of mastery is on the topics, and that would be basically correct. However, what about homework, right? Of course, homework's going to be important for you to be successful. You got to do the homework and make sure that you are feeling really good about the material going into the assessments. The only way to do that is really to do the homework. But is that included in any way in our grade? The answer is yes, it is. So at the very end here, standard 27 is called homework completion. And so you get an expert or a 4 if you have 90 to 100% complete, a proficient or 3, 80 to 90, and so on. So based on your homework completion, that'll basically hopefully give you a free 4, a free expert when I'm tallying up letter grades at the end. All right, so I realize my grading scheme probably takes a little getting used to. And rest assured that before we get to our first assessment, I'm going to remind you about a lot of the details about where to go for test proctoring and all that. I'll be real specific with you so that you'll feel really comfortable going into that. So you haven't heard the last about, just the logistics and the procedures for taking your assessments. But for now, if you're planning on taking them in Yakima or Grandview, you're good to go. If you are taking them in Ellensburg or elsewhere, remember there's a form that you need to fill out, and that form can be found. You'll just run right into it as you are completing your orientation quiz. All right. But if you have any questions about that whole process, please let me know. If you have any questions about anything else, my grading system or anything, please reach out. Remember, send me a message on Canvas, and I will get back to you shortly. All right. Have a great evening, and you can feel free to get started on the class right away. Have a good one.